Hi, welcome to NicheCraft. My name is Cassie and I'm your host, and have I got a great dye video for you. The concept behind this dye video is that I wanted to make a colorway R2, R3 that had to do with one of my favorite movies when I was growing up, which was The Little Mermaid. And the reason I liked it so much, aside from the story, is it's just that I really enjoyed the music. I've always been a very musically aware, and I absolutely loved just going to the theater and seeing it in the theater. My dad took me, and it's just a really like vivid memory from my childhood. So anyway, I decided that I was going to make two colorways. I had a third one in mind, but because of the second colorway, I decided to go ahead and leave it at two. But don't worry, you're going to have lots of content coming when I finish with this introduction. The first one I was going to make the Blue Lagoon, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the movie or not, but in the movie, Sebastian the crab is singing Kiss the Girl, and Ariel and Eric are in the boat in the Blue Lagoon. And the Blue Lagoon is a lot of very kind of dusty jewel tones of different like blues. There actually isn't any teal in it, but you could imagine that there would be teal in it during the day because it's kind of at dusk. And then there's even some purples in there. So what I was trying to do was go for a colorway that kind of brought that idea to life. And then the other one I decided to do was the Sea Witch. So the Sea Witch was one of the forces in the movie that was like on the dark side, and the Sea Witch was black and purple, and oh my goodness, she scared me so much. And anyway, I wanted to do a colorway of black and purple because I thought that it would look really stunning together, and so that was the other colorway I did. The third one I wasn't so certain, but I ended up not doing it because something very interesting happened when I did the Sea Witch colorway. So I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what kind of dyeing that I'm doing today. I'm using a very unconventional and never before seen dyeing method, to my knowledge, called wok dyeing. You'll see it when I show it. So now that you guys know the concept behind the colorways, I wanted to say just a few things you guys will understand before I roll that footage. One of the things is I wanted to thank Mary so much for sending me an acid dye. She sent me the dye Spruce, which is something that I was really hoping to get because I wanted to do a tonal dyeing with acid dye of a nice burgundy and a nice deep green for the holidays coming up, and I thought that that would be a really great thing to use, and I also love that color too. And speaking of spruce and evergreens and stuff like that, this right here, you guys might have seen it in my Mystery Box Monday this week. It's a mosaic crochet. Mosaic crochet is a way of making these really intricate patterns and designs, and I am currently working on that behind me, which will end up being a very large blanket. It will fit a full-size bed very easily with drape. And I just wanted to make something really nice that would hopefully stay in the family for at least a little while, right? And so I've started this. So I just wanted to tell you what that was, because some people mentioned it in the comments of the other video. That said, you guys want to watch a dye video? Here's the footage. So the first thing that I do is that I soak the yarn for at least 30 minutes in water mixed with a couple of tablespoons of vinegar. What this does, it adds that vinegar there so that it will be kind of primed to absorb the dye. Once the soak has finished, then all you have to do is wring out the yarn, and you don't have to get all of the water out, obviously. But in this case, I decided to try walk dyeing. So walk dyeing is not a thing. It it's just something that I came up with because all I wanted to do was dye two skeins of yarn at the same time, and I didn't want to dip dye. I wanted to kind of have some randomness to the colors. So what I did was I put two skeins of yarn in a wok because it would hold both of them. And then I tried to just submerge it with water, knowing that I was going to be pouring dye on top of it, right? So I added the water and the vinegar and kind of pressed it in there so that it would be completely submerged. Then I went over to 4 premix dyes that I had come up with for the colorway that I wanted. Now, I've already told you guys that I was going for a Little Mermaid theme. That might not have come out exactly the way I wanted it to, but for this purpose, let's pretend like everything comes out perfect. So the different dyes that I used for this one, was a very deep dark teal, a sky blue, a very inky dark blue, and then a dark purple that was more on the blue side of purple than on, like, let's say, the red or pink side. So I poured all of that dye on top of the yarn, and then I closed the lid on the wok and I turned up the heat so that it could kind of cook there or steam set, right? For about 5 minutes was what I decided because I knew that I also had to flip it and dye the other side. So I let it just sit there for a little while until most of the dye had been absorbed from the yarn, and then I flipped it using some kitchen tongs, and I exposed the area of the yarn that had not gotten as much dye saturated in it. And as you can see, there are even some white patches, and I expected that. That wasn't a surprise. So what I did was that after that, I just poured the dye onto those exposed places another time, and then I covered it and I let it sit there and cook for maybe about 10 minutes at that point. I think that at some point I did decide to add a little bit more vinegar just to speed up the process of the dye binding to the fiber. But, normally what I would suggest doing is every time you add dye, add a little bit of vinegar with it as well, okay? And you can do that in whatever way that you want. Once I have let it sit for a while and steam, there's the point where you have to make that decision about whether or not the yarn is ready to be washed and then laid to dry so that it can then become your beautiful colorway, right? So there are two steps that I personally go through to make sure that the yarn is ready to be taken out of the container, okay? The first thing I do is that I use a spoon and I dip it into the water with where the dye was added, and I see if it's clear. And so in this case, you can see that the dye is completely gone from the water, which is really awesome. So why do I do this? I do this so that I know that that dye is bound to the yarn and is not going to run, right? So the first test is whether or not there's any dye left. The next test is washing it, and I like to wash my yarn with dish soap. I pick that out from Kimnit's tutorials. And you can see that as I lift it up and I let that water run down, that the water is running clear. Once I wash both skeins of yarn, I rinse them out and then I give it to Greg to really wring them out as best he can. It now becomes just kind of damp yarn. Once that's happened, then I take the yarn and I hang it up someplace to dry. So you can do it outside, you can do it inside, doesn't really matter. And usually after about 24 hours, it's completely dry, right? So once it's completely dry, then you can see how the color turned out, right? And I just want to tell you a few things about the color that I've noticed. First off, when you're actually dyeing the yarn, it's going to look so much darker than when it looks when it's dried, okay? Because of this, if you want to hit a certain color mark for your yarn, you're going to want to almost quote unquote over dye it when it's wet. And then another thing is that there are so many different factors that one can't really control for when it comes to dyeing with food coloring. And some of that I'll talk about in the next colorway that I made. So the next colorway that I made, I did the exact same steps. I pre-soaked the yarn and then I wrung them out. Then I put them in the wok and then I covered the yarn with water in the wok and I added some tablespoons of vinegar, right? And this colorway, I wanted to look like the Sea Witch, and I was really excited about making this particular colorway. And I was really like the idea in my head was really clear. I just thought that black and purple would look really cool together. So I just pre-mixed some black and purple food coloring, and I did that with the knowledge that this food coloring can split. And what I mean by that is that in order to make purple, you mix like red and blue, right? So red actually binds to yarn quicker than the blue does. So when you pour on the dye from food coloring and it's purple, some areas of that purple are going to be more pink, and some areas of that purple might even be blue. Black, it's actually even worse. And so again, that red really absorbs fast and some of the other colors absorb fast, but the one that you're typically left with in the end is a really light, beautiful teal green. Um, think the Northern Lights, okay, as far as that color, but it just doesn't, belong in a purple and black colorway. Then I pressed on it to try to spread that dye out so that it would be able to become fully saturated on one side. I already knew that I was going to flip it and pour more dye, so I wasn't too worried about the bottom of the yarn. I was just wanted to make sure that I got the top of the yarn really saturated. So again, I turned up the heat a little bit, put the lid on it, and let it set for a little while. Only when I took the lid off, it was not what I was thinking it was going to be looking like. The dye definitely split. There's some areas where the purple looks more purple pink. There's some areas where the purple looks more blue purple, and even the black. If you look closely, you can see some of those greens in there. So when I flipped the yarn over and I applied the second round of dye, what I did was I actually added vinegar to the dye. I added 1 tablespoon to each cup that had the remaining dye in it, hoping that that would help it strike faster, like all the colors strike faster. I actually don't know if this worked as well as I wanted it to or not, just because I have not experimented enough with this to know. But I did get a result that was a little bit more aesthetically appealing and more like the original idea that I had. Once the dye had almost fully set, I was looking at it and there was just too many areas that had more of a teal color or more of a blue color than I was comfortable with. So I actually added a third um, set of dye to try to over dye that while it was still hot and it was still processing. So in this case, I was trying really hard to get that purple and black, but what ended up happening is that I ended up splitting the dye, and while the result is absolutely gorgeous, I don't know if most people would look at it and think the sea witch. But going on with this particular dyeing, as you can see, I also washed it, made sure that the water ran clean, and again, I also had that dry for at least 24 hours, and now we're here. So how about we go to my table now so we can look at the result of my dye project a little bit more closely and come up with some conclusions about how this particular dyeing went. I'll see you there. All right, guys, welcome back. So I guess you are ready to see these dye jobs and what they look like now that they are completely dry. So I'm not the best at hanging up yarn like this. So let's go ahead and open this up and look at the colorway that I have decided to call Blue Lagoon. And that's referring to the part in the movie where Sebastian is singing Kiss the Girl. So, one thing about my Blue Lagoon yarn is that I wanted it to come out primarily blue. To me, at least this one, right here especially, it looks primarily teal. And the deeper and darker colors over here, they're not presented as well. But if I just kind of twist this yarn around so that you can see all the different tonal variations, and I hold it up a little bit more right there so my camera you can see that there are a lot of different tones of blues and purples and that kind of aqua color, and it really did come out really gorgeous. So while the teal, at least in this hank, is a little bit much, I still really love this yarn. I think purple and teal go really well together, and then with all those blues in between, just makes it really come together. So just wanted to show you so that we can compare how the two hanks look, since I dyed them at the same time, but in both of them I kind of added it randomly, so these are not going to be identical. So as you can see, just like this one has a lot more teal in it than the other colors, but you can find some patches of purples and darker blues when you look. Now that blue, I don't know if you can see it real well, but that blue right there, I was hoping to get more of that. So basically, the biggest lesson that I've learned from this is if you want to dye a deeper blue, either add a whole lot more colors or go ahead and get some more commercial dye, like acid dye. But in that case, you have to be very careful about making sure that you're wearing all the protective equipment and all of that, because you don't want to dye anything with acid dye without a lot of protective equipment. So this Blue Lagoon yarn, I think, is gorgeous, and I'm excited to make something with it. I would say that this is a yarn weight 4. And I think that this turned out amazing. So I'm going to put this a little bit to the side. In fact, I'm putting it off camera so that we can now look at the Sea Witch. Okay, so this is very interesting. So at first glance, it does look really nice. It's got the purples and a little bit of blacks here, maybe more gray than black. And the purples are really rich, aren't they? But let's open these up. Yeah, so when you open it up, I mean, it is definitely more purple, right? But the black split way too much. And some of them, it almost looks like a maroon black instead of actual black, which I think is really interesting. And that teal color that I was talking about that was coming from the black, there's an example right there. And you can see a lot of it right here. You know, I had gone back and tried to make sure that you know, was dyed over, but I just wasn't able to get every single spot. And at the point that I was when I saw that the dye was breaking so severely, I was like, I didn't really care as much, because for me, hitting the colorway perfectly wasn't necessarily my main goal. I would be absolutely thrilled if I had the color of Blue Lagoon and the color of the Sea Witch exactly the way I wanted, but and let me go ahead and unhang this one too, so you can see, you know, between these two how it is very, very similar. Yeah, so that worked out well too. I just wanted to show you how these two yarns, how well they go together with one another. So you can see that this Blue Lagoon and this Sea Witch yarn would pair up absolutely gorgeously. Yeah, let's see if we can get it to like look at it together. So, I mean, it might not be a perfect match or anything, but they could pair, and that would be kind of cool. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this yarn as far as what I'm gonna make with it, but I do know I want to keep it. I definitely am excited to see what I make with this and how that looks. And obviously, once I make something with this, I will definitely show you. So what is next on my yarn dyeing journey? Well, the next place to go is using those commercial acid dyes, and I am so excited to start doing that. I've been doing a lot of research on them, and I am actually more comfortable with my ability to dye using acid dyes than I am with food coloring, mostly because I can measure it and I can control, for example, the dye yarn ratio and other things like that. Obviously, I've been watching a lot of Kim Knits as well. There's only a few more things that I need to begin my acid dye journey, and that is I need a respirator mask, and I also need a large, like a buffet container so that I can dye multiple skeins at the same colorway all at once. So I just want to let you guys know, anybody who wants to help me out with this, that I have both of those on my channel wish list, and just so you guys know, they are both less than I think $35. I know that mask is like under 20, and then the buffet might be something like 35 or something like that. So if you want to help me out, that would really help. I also will continue to put up different colors that I don't have yet, but do understand that I do have a lot of colors already. So that's less important. You know, but please don't feel pressured. Obviously, I still have some undyed yarn. I still have a lot of food coloring I can play with. But once I get that last bit of equipment, then I'll be ready to start showing you guys some really cool stuff that I can do with that acid dye. So I'm really looking forward to that. I hope you guys enjoy these dye videos, and I know I do. I'm actually really surprised how much I love doing this. I didn't expect to enjoy it so much. And I just wanted to say, I hope to be able to post these kinds of videos maybe once a week or once every other week. And let me know what you think. If you have any kind of dye ideas as far as colors you'd like to see together or something like that, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're not already. And I will see you soon in another video. Bye for now.